Well, good morning. Good morning to those who are attending the meeting live, and good morning also to those who are online connected. So it's my pleasure. This is Jose Güell. This is my pleasure to present the satellite Symposia, focus on the first inverted meniscus EDOF IOL improving peripheral vision. I think that we have a tremendous group of presenters. The first one is explaining the history and the concept of ArtIOL. This is the inventor of this concept, well-known PhD Pablo Artal. Afterwards, we will have another very well-known surgeon, Oliver Findl, talking about the relevance and the importance of peripheral vision in pseudophakic eyes. And at the end, finally, we will have the famous surgeon also, Ines Yago from Murcia University, focused on and presenting the results, the clinical experience with a significant number of eyes treated along these last 2 or 3 years. So no more delay. Pablo.
Well, thank you very much, Jose, and well, thank you, all of you, just being here or being remotely. I'm really extremely happy and excited to share with you this new lens, and in basically giving a brief introduction on these features and some ideas, and also I want to acknowledge the people behind this. First, the Voptica team. Voptica is a small startup company doing initially instruments, very complicated instruments, and we moved to lenses, and several team members are here or in Spain, and I really would like to thank all the hard work behind this. And well, you can tell well why you are introducing a new intraocular lens. So many intraocular lenses, right? Out there, you go in the exhibit hall, and it's so many. Well, we know a little bit because actually we were behind many of the most innovative IOLs. We were behind the first aspheric IOL. We went behind the first diffractive EDOF. We were behind the first adjustable IOL and the first IOL for IMD. And we were also doing a lot of instruments to measure pseudophakic eyes. We helped developing OCAS, VAO, the first peripheral wavefront sensor. So I think we are, I don't want to be modest, but I think we are naturally ready to invent the best IOL ever. And I think this is the one. And I'm completely convinced that you are very, I think you are lucky because you are not too many in the room because of the pandemic. But I think you are really here listening about what is the best concept in many, many years in intraocular lenses. And I'm going to explain the reason. And you are going to understand, you know this much better than me. And IOLs have been a lot of advances in optics, in materials, everything. But there is a big issue that you all recognize. This is a nice picture here of a crystalline lens. This is our lens, and we substitute with this type of intraocular lens. And of course, for good reasons, IOLs are very thin, and the good reasons are surgical reasons. But from the point of view of the optics, a thin lens substituting a very thick lens, our crystalline lens, is doing a very bad optical properties, especially in the periphery. So this is basically the main issue, and this is a little bit of ray tracing, but our crystalline lens, because it's thick, is doing a very good job in the periphery. The optics in the periphery is really good in our eyes. Every standard intraocular lens is having significant issues in the periphery. So this is the problem. We know this. We actually studied this years ago, and there is this paper that if somebody's interested in IOBS with Jose Maria Marin here in the audience, this study was very, very simple. We had a group of patients, one eye is still the natural eye with the natural crystalline lens, the other eye with the standard IOL, and we measure field curvature, and basically the blue one that is flat, this is eccentricity, is with the natural eye, and the red is with the IOL. So there is a defocus in the periphery. And also astigmatism, this is peripheral astigmatism. Our natural eye has peripheral astigmatism, but with intraocular lenses can be double. So we knew this. This was published in 2013, and actually we did this earlier. We usually publish very late. So we know this from a lot of time. So we know the problem. So why not to solve this problem? Because every lens out there is basically focusing a very small part of the visual field. And Oliver will be talking about this, but we know that compromised peripheral vision is having a real impact in life of the patients. Increased risk of fall, poor object recognition, driving difficulties, limit freedom of movement, and so on. So peripheral vision, it's really very important for the patients. So how is our solution? We explore many options, to be honest. And the options can be like optically complicated and more complicated surgery. We don't want to do that. So we want to keep an IOL that is completely standard for any surgeon. And we come with this idea of inverted meniscus. So basically, we get these lenses, right? And why this is working? So basically, this is working for one reason. We move optically the nodal point farther in the direction of the retina. So it's, in a way, a copy, we say mimic, we mimic the natural lens just by changing this design. So this is the type of lenses, just standard, but with this inverted shape. We were also very lucky to have partners in the care group that they help us to manufacture the lenses, and the lenses are CE marked, and they are basically out there. These are a little bit the technical specification. There is, you have information in the room, but most important, mention inverted meniscus, material is hydrophobic acrylic, and a standard type of platform. That is what we really want to have it. Very quickly, some testing. This testing was done by Harris Ginis in Greece, in optical bench. So we have an eye model, and you can see here at 45 degrees, the typical image in a standard lens, a lot of astigmatism, you can see elongated, and we get less. So it's kind of better image quality. How this is comparing with standard targets, letters? On axis, both standard lenses and our lenses are good and very similar, no surprise. And the periphery, this is 40 degrees, you can see the impact in the image quality. So basically, in our lens, we have similar image quality on axis, but better at different retinal eccentricities. Very briefly, because this will be basically treated by Ines, we wanted to have not only a lens that is better in the periphery, we really want to have a better EDOF lens. And we have been working in this also for many years. Basically, we want to have an EDOF lens that we can customize. The reason for this is that we have our Arapithoctis bow instrument that allows to do all this type of customization. So this is the reason we basically have 4 models of the lenses, 25, 40, 55, 70, that keep this inverted meniscus and have different amounts of asphericity. So, well, the big thanks here are coming to the doctors that they were doing this implantation. Already more than 1,000 lenses had been implanted. And Pedro, Tanya, and Jose Maria Marin, also here in the audience, they had been instrumental, and other colleagues in the ophthalmic clinics in Spain. They were really doing a great job doing this implantation. And Ines will tell you about the clinical results that we are really very happy. Well, this is a nice image of how the lenses are sitting. And you can see here the particular shape, right? So this is just the meniscus shape, just like a nice image. So a little bit of summary. And I don't like this slide very much, to be honest, because these lenses are designed for everybody. So I think that this lens fits for every patient. But, well, you can kind of concrete a little bit more. Well, active patient, good distance and intermediate, comfortable night driving, very good for post-refractive refractive surgery, because basically you can adapt for the spherical aberration. Well, of course, this is a great lens, probably the best out there for patients with any type of retinal pathologies, because we are improving image quality in the periphery. Those not tolerating diffractive IOLs, some of you that know me for years, I don't like very much diffractive lenses. I think that optically they are really awful. So we are really trying to avoid this. And why this is different? Standard depth of focus is really adapted to each patient. We know that, and Oliver will present it, reduce peripheral astigmatism, and we improve field curvature. We improve contrast sensitivity, no glare, no halo, no standard implantation. So more summary, these lenses are already CE marked, so any of you in Europe and in probably other countries also can implant it. Hydrophobic material, easy to implant. Ines will tell you more than 1,000 eyes with excellent clinical results in terms of accuracy and visual quality. We demonstrate that we improve peripheral vision, customizable EDOF, and a unique optical technology. So these lenses are ready for you, are ready for your patient. We are, well, you can have this art here with this banana peel, right? That we need to demonstrate that. What we already demonstrate is that optics is better in the periphery. Contrast sensitivity is better in the periphery. We don't know yet what is the clinical implication in real life for the patient. I'm convinced that there is some, so we need to really demonstrate it with more serious, with more patient. But I'm really convinced that this can be a very good service to the community, right? If we can avoid old people falling, if we can avoid driving accidents, and that would be great, right? So that's basically some of our goals, and also having a better image quality at every distance. So more thanks, because basically this project has been is a small miracle, because we are very small, right? We are not a big company. We are Davids, and there are Goliaths out there. And getting the idea from the paper in the university lab and having in patients without money in a small corner of a peripheral country in Europe, it's a small miracle. So then it's really thanks for people in Voptica, people in the laboratory, people in ophthalmology, people making the lenses in Care Group, Harris in Greece, all the users that they are already implanted the lenses. A big thanks to the group of speakers here. I really appreciate it to be here with me. And of course, everybody in the room, everybody out there. Really, I hope you get the information and you are really appreciating this new lens. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pablo. We will leave questions at the end of the three talks, if you wish. So it's my pleasure now to invite Oliver Findl, is the incoming president of the ESCRS, chairman at the Virus Institution in Vienna, and he will talk about the relevance of peripheral vision in pseudophakic.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. It's really good to speak in front of a live auditorium again, and not just in front of a monitor and a camera. Here, my financial disclosures, none are relevant to this talk. So you already had a nice introduction, and obviously when we assess IOLs, we look at the very central visual field, if at all. We look at visual acuity, contrast sensitivity, but all right in the center. And until now, we've actually put very little emphasis or have no focus on looking at what happens in the periphery or mid-periphery. But there is another thing, which is that we know that after cataract surgery, there seems to be an increase in accidents. And I think the reasoning for that was always, well, the patients, before they have cataract surgery, they may be less active. And now that they see better again, they become more active, they do things again. And that's why they have an increased risk of having any kind of accident. But it may also be that actually the visual field has changed, meaning that the quality of vision in the periphery is not as good and with IOLs, and that's something we've really never assessed. So why is peripheral vision actually critical? Well, we know that for tasks like detecting, for example, spatial frequency gratings, which are somewhere in the periphery, or for driving performance, of course, are highly dependent on peripheral vision. And it also is of crucial role in mobility as well as posture control. So about how quick we can walk and with which safety we can walk. And it's quite clear that if you have peripheral vision deficits, you will have an increased risk of falls. And I'll show you a slide on just that. So here, sort of the photograph where everything is in focus and has high quality no matter where, which is obviously not what the human eye does. And this is probably more of a simulation of a normal vision, so high spatial frequency and contrast in the center, and then obviously getting less more towards the periphery, and then here a very degraded periphery, which obviously will cause could cause some issues. So the peripheral vision and its implication on accidents, it has been shown that peripheral vision loss, and that's obviously also in patients, for example, with glaucoma, increases the risk of falls by 1.4-fold. It also worsens the stability, especially in older patients, of posture. And again, there's a direct incidence of a link to the incidence of falls. Also, if there's an imbalance between the central and peripheral visual parts, this again leads to a higher incidence of accidents, and especially for those where you need to assess heights or have any kind of spatial awareness, as you could imagine. So again, poor peripheral vision, we know, increases the risk of falls, especially also due to the impairment of circular motion perception. And you've seen this slide in a similar way just before from Pablo. The issue is that we have a defocused image in the peripheral retina with a standard eye, or even a phakic eye, but especially with a standard IOL. And ideally, we would like to have a much better image and also better contrast in order to have a better peripheral vision. And also the astigmatism plays a major role because you get a lot of astigmatism, especially in the peripheral retina. So here again, this image you've seen, this issue and the idea of this new inverted meniscus to actually give you a better optical performance in the periphery. And this is probably the most critical slide of this entire talk, which actually shows now the comparison of this new type of IOL, shown in blue, compared to a control lens, which is a standard biconvex IOL. And you can see here on the left side for peripheral defocus, and on the right side for peripheral astigmatism. And what you can see is there is a very clear difference, especially here now in the temporal visual field, of 2 diopters of peripheral defocus with a standard lens, which is essentially neutralized by this new meniscus type of IOL. And similarly here also in peripheral astigmatism, there is a significant decrease in the peripheral astigmatism. So the central defocus or astigmatism is actually very similar, as you would expect, but in the periphery the differences are significant. And this is quite a big study actually of 158 eyes and 61 control eyes. So what can you do now? We can also try to assess, and this is always a little difficult, especially with elderly patients. We've also tried to do that previously in a study assessing peripheral visual quality, is to do eccentric contrast sensitivity tests. So the patient fixates a fixation point, and then there is a monitor, a computer monitor, in this case an eccentricity of 45 degrees. And you can then show the patient, contrast gratings, and the patient has to identify which direction they go. So you can essentially identify the contrast detection sensitivity, in this case at 45 degrees. And what you can see here is there is a significant difference between the standard control lens and the new meniscus-shaped lens. So we obviously have better contrast sensitivity in the periphery or in the mid-periphery of the visual field. Now the question is, how does that affect your performance in daily life and your functional vision? So this is again a simulated image. This is the way a camera sees it. Everything is in focus. You can see a step here. You can see here the sign for where you need to go if there's an emergency. And for a standard lens, obviously you will have a lot of, let me say, blur here because of the induced astigmatism and the defocus. And this would be a simulation of what we would expect with a better visual field. So you would expect, for example, to see the step better and be able to identify it more readily and easily. So here, some nice experiments which were done now, in this case, inducing peripheral astigmatism with spectacles and walking through over this, let me say, 2 steps. And you can, obviously with these small attached lights, you can do an exact tracking of the feet while they're walking, and you can see that in the right bottom in that graph for the right and the left foot. And now what you can do is you can now take a planar lens and then have the same subject do this with a cylinder induction, so inducing astigmatism with a cylinder lens. And what you can see is that both the time needed with the astigmatism, as well as also the safety of the foot being put down is significantly different in this setting. So here you can see the foot misplacement in the first step is already the first problem, therefore also not less stable. And also very cautious. You can see there was actually an extra step which was done with the induced astigmatism. So here you can see the effects of this slightly worse peripheral or semi-peripheral vision. Now putting that into numbers, here the start off and then the time, looking at the time of doing this kind of this exercise of stepping over these blocks with low power astigmatism and then with a high powered astigmatism induction with the spectacles, and you can see that in several of the subjects there is a significant increase of doing this gait experiment. So that actually really shows the impact of the peripheral visual field. Now here I'm just going to show you just a few data on the few lenses we have done just recently, because we only started end of August, and these are just the first 4 patients, so very little, and I feel a little, yeah, I mean, Ines is going to show much more data, so well, that's the only data I have at the moment. But just to show you the lens in standard cataract patients with actually very good refractive outcomes, very close to emmetropia, or to what we were expecting. You can see here the IOL Master 700 images with the lens in place after surgery. Here an image of the lens in retroillumination, and then here you can see the meniscus shape of the lens in a dilated pupil with the anterior segment OCT as well as with the IOL Master. And so, you know, that's pretty straightforward. The lens is very simple to implant and really needs no extra effort. Here's some acuity data, both uncorrected and distance corrected, as well as intermediate vision. We had some patients actually with very good intermediate vision and some with moderate. And in general, if you look at, for example, the CatQuest questionnaire, also a satisfactory or very satisfactory outcomes, which actually no difficulties in most of the activities which are listed in the 9 questions of the CatQuest questionnaire. So to summarize, this is a lens which improves what we call the peripheral defocus and peripheral astigmatism, and therefore also improves contrast sensitivity, as I showed you. And this may lead to less risk of falls, to better object recognition, better driving performance, which obviously still needs to be illustrated and shown. And I believe in general, for patients, hopefully more freedom of movement and locomotion, meaning regaining of independence, which I think is very important, especially in these elderly patients we're dealing with in the cataract surgery arena. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Oliver. And now, again, it's my pleasure to introduce Ines Yago. She will focus on their long-term clinical experience with the ArtIOL in her group.
Hello, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Pablo for his invitation to participate in this symposium. It's a pleasure to be in a face-to-face congress again. I'm going to talk about our clinical experience with the ArtIOL lenses. Now that we have implanted more than 1,000 lenses, here you can see the main surgeons of this project, Pedro Tañá and José María Marín, working both in Optalvist in Spain. I know Pablo has explained the lens in detail, but I would like to give you some tricks about the folding and the insertion of the lens. I would recommend not to use viscoelastic material during the folding of the lens inside the cartridge. Instead, I usually use BSS, and I would also recommend not to fold the aptics over the optic really tight. Sorry, because it has music. I would recommend not to fold the aptics over the optic because they can stick together and it could be a little bit challenging to detach both aptics once the lens is inside the eye. I usually do a conventional cataract surgery through a 2.2 incision. I can implant the lens through that incision with no problems. One important thing is that you should make sure that the lens is properly implanted. So once it is inside the eye, you should be able to rotate it clockwise. So that's the way I make sure it's correctly implanted. Here you can see some technical specifications about the lens. There's nothing special to say about it because it's a standard hydrophobic C-loop lens. If you see the lens under the microscope, you won't see any rings or nothing special. It's a platform we are really used to implant. We're talking about ArtIOL lenses, but there are 4 different lenses. There's not just one lens. There are 4 different lenses with different amounts of negative spherical aberration. We can do different combination of these lenses depending on the patient expectations. So we can, as I've said, we can do many combinations to achieve the patient goals with the surgery. First of all, I would like to present the results in terms of safety and efficacy with the ArtIOL 25, as it's the largest group we have implanted. We have 355 eyes implanted with this model, and as you can see, the refractive results are good, with a post-op spherical equivalent of -0.18. with up to 90% of patients within half a diopter of residual refraction, with most of them within 0.25, and over 90% of patients perform 0 logmar in best-corrected distance visual acuity, as you can see here. There's not just a good lens in terms of refraction or visual acuity, it's also a good lens because it has, in my opinion, other clear benefits. Most patients are really satisfied and report their vision as quite natural, similar to the one they used to have before having cataracts. So this is something that makes sense if you think about the design of the lens and the things they have said before. We have a really small incidence of PCO. We think it's because of the shape of the posterior part of the optic, but this is something that it's hard to demonstrate. Because of these inverted meniscus, we have a really low internal reflection, so we don't have any halos reported and no other light side effects either. The anterior concavity of the lens removes all the external reflections, so we avoid that glassy appearance that most pseudophakic patients have, and most of them really dislike. Well, we're moving on now to the results of the rest of the models of the ArtIOL lenses. Here you can see the refractive results. As you can see, using the A constant suggested, we are having a slightly myopia in the post-op period. But interestingly, we are having really good results in uncorrected distance visual acuity. This is because this lens is really forgiving with that residual refraction defects after surgery. With all the distance corrected, we can see as the ArtIOL 70 performs really good results in intermediate vision up to 20/25 and near 20/30 for near. and as well the results in ArtIOL 40 and 55 with intermediate level of negative spherical aberration is quite good in intermediate. If we compare ArtIOL lenses with the state of the art, we can see that ArtIOL 70 have better results in terms of intermediate and near visual acuity than one of the most popular EDOF lenses commercial at the moment. We have seen the graphics with all that distance corrected myopia, but if we see the lens working in the real life, we can see that monocularly ArtIOL 70 has really excellent results in intermediate vision with 0 logmar in intermediate and really good near vision as well with 20/25. ArtIOL 40 and 55 have similar curves as you can see here, and surprisingly ArtIOL 25, which is with the lowest amount of negative spherical aberration, also performs really good results in terms of intermediate and near visual acuity if we compare it with a standard monofocal, as it's the gray line at the bottom of this graphic. So if you see the results we have just shown, we can imagine different combinations to achieve different results. I would suggest 2 different combinations we are using at the moment and with really good results. I think binocular implantation of ArtIOL 40 would provide our patients of an excellent distance and intermediate vision, and as you have seen before, they have really good uncorrected distance visual acuity as well, so they have really good tolerance to residual refractive errors, and the combination of ArtIOL 40 and 70 would provide good results in all distances binocularly without correction, without spectacles dependence. So here you can see that binocular results that I have said of the combination of the ArtIOL 70 and 70 and 40 with the yellow and orange line respectively. And as you can see binocularly, these patients have really excellent uncorrected distance, intermediate and near vision. As Pablo has said before, I think this is a good option almost for everyone, but I would suggest these implants in these particular groups of patients. All those highly demanding patients that want to have really good far and intermediate vision without light side effects like drivers or pilots, maybe young patients with unilateral cataract. The second eye in a monofocal lens implanted patient could also, in that way, we are improving the intermediate vision. And in particular, 2 groups of patients would be really suitable for these implants, as they are patients with previous myopic refractive surgery with some additional positive spherical aberration. So we are compensating that excess of spherical aberration, and all those patients with glaucoma or maybe some kind of macular issues, because we are enhancing the peripheral vision. That might be a good point in some of them in the future. And we are not reducing the contrast sensitivity that it's also important in that group of patients. So in summary, I will say that we have one standard, apparently a standard IOL, and we don't need to change anything in our standard procedure. We have really excellent refractive accuracy and visual acuity, as you have seen. We have different combinations we can choose depending on what we have on the table. So we are choosing different lenses but the same platform. Most patients say they have really natural vision, which I think it could be one of the goals we have when we are going under a surgery, and we are improving peripheral optics, so that might have a role in patients' comfort. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ines. And now, well, time is open for discussion. I presume that we will have the questions on the screen if they are coming from the virtual platform. But if you want to make any question, you have microphones. You have 1, 2, and 3. You need to, Jorge, you can go to the microphone.
Congratulations, Pablo. I think this is a great issue because you have done something that nobody has done from the scratch to what you have is a really portfolio of lenses. And one question is about the Meniscus lens. You know, we published in ESCRS 25 years ago, you know, a matrix calculation formula which we defined the shape factor for intraocular lenses. And the shape factor was depending on the shape of the cornea and the axial length. And that made a display of different shapes for different type of lenses depending on these two parameters. For us, the ideal eye for this type of lens was a myopic eye. And my question to you, I don't know if you have detected this paper published by us so many years ago, whether this shape factor has its Q factor, you know, if you understand as well, how this is influential in other type of eyes, like for instance, standard eyes, metropic eyes, as far as the shape factor seems to be for us only ideal for myopes. This was a geometrical optics question.
Well, thank you very much, Jorge, for the question, and yeah, you are right, and this is something we have in mind. First, probably your calculation and your idea that the shape factor was this particular shape factor for the meniscus was better for myopic eyes was based only at the time in on-axis calculations. And our main issue here is that we had been trying to optimize. We forget about on-axis, and then we basically concentrate in the peripheral part of the retina. But in any case, we know that there is a lot of studies, especially in myopia development in children, that peripheral retina is different depending on the central refractive state. So we know that we can even do a little bit better. We can refine the particular shape to adapt to the central refraction of the patient. So it can be a little bit fine-tuned differently for myopes or for hyperops. So your point is very good, and this is something that can be considered even to improve the design. Although what we get here, this particular meniscus shape, we try to get like the optimum features for one lens fits all peripheral shapes, let's say, right? But can be also the same that we are doing on axis for spherical aberration. We customize. You can do customization when you measure in advance peripheral shape or peripheral refraction. So that's a very good point for further improvements in the future.
Maybe just to add something, you know, I think that it would be nice in the next presentation that you will do about this topic, just to see how much is the balance between image quality distortion, which is what analyzed this factor set that we calculated with the peripheral visual, because it should be a balance, you know, between the visual axis and the peripheral as well. This is something that nobody has explored ever, and you have this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question there.
Yes, could you go to the microphone?
Thank you very much for good presentation and very interesting concept of the lens. Dr. Andrei from Ukraine. I have a very practical question. Did any of you face the case of negative dysphotopsia with the patients with these lenses? Because it is not very frequent, but it's very disturbing when it happens. And one of the theories why it happens is that the lens is further from the iris, and we treat this. I faced several cases of this negative dysphotopsia, and the treatment was just to move the optic out of the rhexis closer to the iris. So from the lens, I understood that your lens is deeper in the eye, so you have deeper anterior chamber. Did you ever see any kind of problems?
Okay, so I have to be embarrassed again. I only did 4 eyes, for 4 patients, so I can't comment on negative dysphotopsia because you need a large series. And I'm sure you can say more about that. I would expect there to be actually less negative dysphotopsia, if anything, because if you look at, I don't know whether you saw the OCTs I showed, if you look at the periphery of the lens, it's actually in a normal position as with a standard IOL, but the meniscus shape, obviously in the center, it's a little further back. So I would actually, if anything, expect less, but I can't obviously comment because my series is much too small at this point.
I don't know if Pedro or Jose Maria want to say something about this, but we are, in my opinion, I have no experience with that problem with these lenses. No.
Thank you.
But Pablo, do you also, would you want to comment on that? You know, the idea of negative dysphotopsia was always that there are rays of light which go peripheral to, anterior to the optic, and then obviously there's rays which go through the optic and are diverted or reflected, and then there's the rays which go to the peripheral retina, and then that gives you this dark, arc, which the patients are often disturbed by.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, all these photopsia phenomena usually appear to a much larger eccentricity. So we try to improve optics quality in what we could say mid-periphery, right? So we were not initially concerned about the very far periphery. But I think it's like an extra bonus. I think the particular shape of the lens is also making a good effect to reduce the effect of these photopsias, that they are not very common, but as you said, in many patients it's really very bad. So we don't have a proof, but our feeling is that these lenses are doing a better job to prevent these peripheral dysphotopsias. Although, to be completely honest, we were not thinking on that in the design phase, but it's like an extra thing.
Yeah, and I also have to, absolutely, negative dysphotopsia is a real problem, and absolutely, we have many patients who actually report it even on the first or second day, but it goes away in most. And then, as you know, with also many of the symptomatic patients, after 6, 9, even 12 months, it often goes away, or they get used to it and they're not irritated. But there are some where we have to do something, like you said, anterior buttonholing, or putting a sulcus lens in. We've done all kinds of things, additional add-on lenses, all very, very cumbersome and very troubling. And I would believe with this lens, just from my very small optics knowledge, if anything, I would expect less.
Ines, one question. Did you customize the kind of art lens that you were using in post-refractive surgery eyes? So did you decide, depending on the Q value or the sphericity value, residual value, if you were going to use the 40 or the 75 or the 70 or the 25?
No, I think that we have a few cases included in the results I've shown you because we exclude all the post-LASIK patients in this group. But I think they choose, I didn't do the surgeries in that particular cases, but I think they choose, like there are 3, 4 myopes that were high myopes that went under refractive surgery, and they were directly implanted with the ArtIOLs 70. I think they didn't choose the lens because of the aberration. I don't think so. I'm not sure. No.
Did you? No? Jose Maria? So you select the 70 in those cases? Okay. Which is quite good if this has been well accepted, because if you have a relatively flat cornea because it was a high myopic LASIK, and they are accepting a high sphericity, although conceptually this is compensating the positive of the cornea, but I would have expected to have interference, optical interference, but if it works, this is a good sign.
I think first point, you can do it. You can usually fine-tune to the particular value of the corneal sphericity. I believe they choose just the 70 because they, in these cases, without doing that. And my feeling is in the few cases with the 70 was really very good. Very good result.
That's good.
So. Jose, I have here, I don't know if there is more question, but I have here several questions from the audience. And actually most of them are for already about the dysphotopsia, and they have been already covered. There is one about the size of corneal incision.
I think I've said 2.2, it's a conventional
2.2.
incision.
And another for Dr. Findl is, has the impact of peripheral astigmatism on the mobility also been examined with models that are less influenced by vertex distance, for instance, contact lenses?
Well, I think the study I showed, no, that was with the vertex distance with glasses. I think that the study which really needs to be done is obviously with this lens and comparing it to a standard lens.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. That is in. And again, another question for these photopsias that we already covered. So I think this is from the
virtual one.
Virtual. So
I mean, I have a question for you. I mean, because because you spoke about macular disease as well. You had it on your slides, and it makes sense that if you have somebody with macular disease, early macular disease, or even more pronounced AMD, that you try to improve their visual field, because that could help them, not only navigate, but theoretically maybe even in the sort of, let me say, close navigation. Would you use a 25, meaning make it otherwise as optically high quality as possible, or would you go for a higher lens? I mean, intuitively I would say go for a 25 and try to optimize the peripheral image as much as you can.
yeah, good question. Good question, and yeah, that should be the first. 25 could be the first choice. Although, we realize that the 40, for any reason, is so good for everybody that it's probably also okay going with the 40 for these patients. And again, you can customize. You can really do more measurement and do more customization. But 25 would be first option. Maybe 40 will be working as well, or as good also.
No more questions? Are you encouraged to try them? I am. So as you know, I will start. Well, I have already started, but I have less patients than Oliver. So I thought it was going to be too ashamed my presentation. So, but conceptually, I think you know that we have been working with asphericities for many years with different platforms, as you nicely shown in the beginning, and possibly the most experienced surgeons using or playing with asphericity is Jose Maria, and I think is the right way to go. Anyway, I think this kind of combination, and if at the same time we can improve peripheral vision, I think that this is a very interesting field to be introduced.
I just wanted to ask, because the 25, 40, 55, 70, to put that into perspective. So Pablo, would you say that the 25 is like what we now call enhanced monofocal, or monofocal plus it's sometimes called? There's a lot of lenses from different companies, just a little more, not EDOF yet, but a little more a strong monofocal with obviously the visual field. We've discussed it. That's actually the main aspect. But let's just talk about the depth of field aspect, and then the 40 and 55 are sort of the EDOF range, and then the 70 is like already like a multifocal, even though it's obviously would be not really would be refractive but not diffractive. How would you, just to put things into perspective so people can...
This is a very good question, and I like to include the whole family actually in a EDOF type of lenses. But of course, EDOF, what it means EDOF. It's just, and the 25 is like a very mild EDOF. 40 should be like similar to many of what people call EDOF. And 55 and 70 is like the strong guys in the family. So they are a strong EDOF, right? And the reality is that the 70 version is really competing very well with those people wanting to have real near vision without reading glasses, right? So then you can compete with these diffractive trifocals somehow when you combine binocularly. So yeah, exactly that point. Mm-hmm. So we cover, so the idea with the 4 models is just basically to cover this. And and Ines mentioned this very nicely, that there is all these opportunities to combine binocularly. And then you can do it or you cannot, but then there is a lot of extra play on that.
But Ines, did you combine it also with some myopia, so some micro monovision, or did you just go for emmetropia in both eyes?
I think the lens works better with slight myopia. The combination of myopia and the negative spherical aberration works much better in intermediate and near vision, but you have good results as well in emmetropia. So.
Yeah, it's very small. It's really very small. You target for emmetropia, there is a small myopic sick, and there is something also, well, everybody knows, right? Because we are using negative spherical aberration. This is, what happens is that when people are looking near, especially with bright light, pupils get smaller, and then you get naturally a myopic sieve in your good direction. So it's helping, in addition, when you have a smaller pupil. So everything combined, you don't really need to have a very significant myopic sieve. Mm-hmm. A little bit may help, but it's like if some people are not comfortable with monovision, well, we don't call monovision. Yeah, call whatever. But it's really a very nice binocular approach that is like a spheric binocular near vision correction or whatever.
Now, I'll ask you one more question just from a safety aspect. I mean, I haven't seen it in my cases, I believe you also haven't seen it, and I wouldn't expect it. Decentration tilt, you know, sometimes we get decentration tilts. It's very rare with these kind of modern IOL designs with, you know, hydrophobic acrylic haptics. But what do you think is the sensitivity to decentration and tilt with this lens?
Again, a good question. We don't have a lot of measurement on that. We could do it, we could have it, but we don't have it. So for the 25 and 40, I think it's very, very tolerant also to decentration, right? 70 can be a little bit of a...
It shouldn't have much effect at decentration because of the optic. It's not just a small area in the center of the optic like other EDOF lenses, so it shouldn't have much effect, I think.
But Pablo, you can simulate that at the lab, no?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So
but it's also depending on the particular corneal asphericity.
Of course.
For its patient, but it's I think it's kind of very nicely tolerant also.
Okay.
Actually, in all these cases, we cannot. Well, I don't remember any case that we have a very large decentration.
And the other thing is that as you nicely shown us in a couple of publications that you did years ago, there is a limit in the asphericity adjustment trying to improve depth of focus that is not risky for diminishing quality of vision, so you cannot play as much as you wish. So my question is that, have you had in any of the 70 cases, so are you taking into account the pre-op corneal asphericity before you decide to use a 70? Or would you recommend that, or do you think that that doesn't matter?
This is a good question, and well, to be completely honest, you know, we had been promoting to do adaptive optics in advance, and I think this would be beautiful, just to customize using our devices. The reality is that it's a kind of, we think that we can really promote these lenses without the need of another instrument. And that's the reason we are doing all this. They have in the clinic the adaptive optics simulator, but they are not really using pre-op, because we wanted to be sure that we can do this very good without another instrument. If you have this instrument and you want to customize, everything is going to be even better. but we had not been using it. You can do it.
But the response is that then you are not afraid of having, independently of the corneal sphericity of this particular individual, any problem with the 70, which is you're increasing the negative quite significant. So I think if you have a patient...
Well, we always are conservative, so we were afraid. We are less afraid because we are seeing a very good results, let's say, and then we can do the customization.
I mean, I have a completely different point, and that is, the meniscus shape. There's always the theory that you get a posterior vitreous detachment after cataract surgery because there is this loss of perturbance, of the actual convexity of the crystalline lens when you have an IOL on the back. Now, obviously, we still have a loss of posterior curvature because the IOL is much thinner and is more anterior. But it would be interesting to see, and that's going to be very difficult to assess, of course, because you'd have to do a prospective randomized control trial to see whether you get less posterior vitreous detachments and/or peripheral breaks in these eyes, especially in the myopic eyes, because of that meniscus shape. I know there was a theory by Stuart Cumming a long time ago that the plate haptic lenses, which also tend they were quite thick and also had, sometimes pressed against the posterior capsule, that there was less retinal detachments. And there's a publication, I think 25 years ago, where he showed a big case series. So I think that's an interesting side effect, which may happen. Less breaks, less retinal detachments.
Well, this is a good point, and we were always hoping that there is a lot of clever points that we never thought it in advance, and there is like some additional benefits. So this is something that we are really very open to get this lens used and people doing studies and comparing. We are completely open in the properties, so we are really completely transparent in what it is. So I think we can finish.
I think that we have responded to all those questions that came virtually and directly. I really thank, well, first of all, you, because have prepared a very nice presentations, and you all who remain here for the full session. Thanks very much.